Hey guys, welcome back to the Mind Space. In today's video, we've got an interesting one. We're going to take a look at building a deck, or the deck basics of how to do that. This video is informational for people who are a bit newer to deck building, or for people who are more comfortable with other ways of deck building from other TCGs, where you don't have to pay attention too much to certain additional rules, like upgrading your card to a rare variant over its common. So, we're going to be taking a look at that today. First, a recap of the rules of deck building. Let's remember that we are allowed a maximum of 40 cards. One of those must be a hero, and the remainder are everything else. You are then permitted, on top of that, only a maximum of 15 rares, and then on top of that again, 3 additional uniques, and the rest must then be common. So, let me pull up the website here. We're going to be taking a look at a deck that I built personally and have since playtested, and we're going to rebuild it as an example of my thought process and how I built this with what I was looking at and what I was looking for. So we're going to be doing a Muna deck, a Muna plants list. And when looking at a Muna plants list, the main boss card of this, when we're looking at our major win condition, is the Hydra Kiner. So I'm pulling this up on screen now. We will be using this lovely altered database website to build this list, and yeah, so let's take a look at our boss card for the deck list. First off, I'm going to build everything in common, and then we will move on to what I would choose to upgrade as a rare, why I would choose them and not other cards, and we'll take it from there. So, first off is the Hydra Kiner. It counts itself as a plant, which is important. This will be our boss card. I will also be upgrading this automatically to the rare, and I will explain why later, but first off, we will start with what we're centering our deck around, which is the Hydra Kiner. So, let's take a look at our early game. I've already set the filter to plants, so we want to look at low mana costing cards. And for that, let's do hand costs of up to 3. So we have our first turn look at what we can do early, and something I want to point out is that in a lot of cases, I don't pick my hero first. I pick around my deck, and then I pick the hero to suit the deck. And there's other ways to do that, and you definitely can base your deck around a hero, so this is just my way of doing things, and I prefer it this way around. So let's take another look at our low cost. So this is the Kodama. Something that Muna's very good at is some efficient low costs with good stats on them, and doing things like Anchored and Asleep. We want to, of course, try to get as much of Anchored in as possible, which I will explain why later as well. And we want to be able to also manipulate what our opponent is doing as cheap as possible, as efficiently as possible. So we are going to include the Kodama definitely 3 times, because that gives us a lot of early play and a lot of late game options as well for, well, 2 from the hand and 2 from reserve for 3/3/3 is very efficient when we're looking at 1 mana equals 1/1/1 up. In a lot of cases for Muna, as much as possible, we want to make that as efficient and as cheap as possible. Okay, so moving on. My favorite, probably the best card in the deck perhaps, is the Sneezer Shroom. And I imagine you can see why. It automatically gains Anchored on its own, and this is perfect because we want as many of our Muna cards to have Anchored in order for them to gain boosts, keep boosts, and apply themselves later on for other effects, including Hydra Kiner Rare's effect, which I will get around to, as I've already said. So Sneezer Shroom, I assure you, is a definite 3 of in any Muna list almost, for a number of reasons. So, Aloe Vera. Another one that will probably be the rare version that we use here, but even the common at noon resupply, if you can get this Anchored, draw is always effective in your deck. It's another plant. It's not so ideal statted at 3 for 2/2/4. You want to see this more when you have to go through water sections of the Tumult more than anything else. But don't forget that card draw is very critical in any card game, no matter what form it takes, and it's still very efficient for its cost, particularly the rare. And that's kind of it for our low cost straight off the bat. So we're going to move over to the mid game now. So we will move up to the 4, 5s, and 6s. And the first thing that comes up is probably the best mid card game you can go for. It's very defensive and critical why we're still playing plants, the verdant back. And as you can see, it counts itself as a plant, but you need to have 2 or more other plants for it to trigger, so or for its defender status to not be there anymore for you to be able to advance. However, 4 cost at 5, 5, 6 is way above curve, way more efficient, and critical for being able to stop your opponent on one side while you pound on the other side and give yourself some wiggle room. Very good card, can't understate how good this actually is, and its rare is even better for that. But we will get to that as well. Whether or not we upgrade to the rare is something I will do in the second half of this. But for 4, 5, 6s, that's pretty much all we're going to go for, because we are still only looking at plants right now. And we're trying to get as many plants as we can. So now we will just look at the last, which is the 7, 8, 9, 10. No, the Hydrokina we already have, so that's not going to be a problem. Something that I've not seen in here, we want the regular Drakina. Also 3 times, because it's a plant. As before, it automatically gains Anchored, and it boosts itself at noon, so it will be even stronger on the second go around. Ultimately, if you play this card, you will see it for 4 turns in total. Once when you play it, then it anchors itself, and it will be present in your next turn. Goes to reserve, you play it again, it anchors itself with fleeting, and do not forget that with anchored and fleeting, it will stay on the board even with the fleeting status. As fleeting says if it would be placed in reserve, it instead goes to discard, and anchored says I do not move. So anchored takes precedence in this state. So it will then lose its anchored status, go on to a 4th turn, and a single card, 3 mana, that survives out 2 turns is extremely efficient, and it will then be a 1/3/3 on the second go around, and you can of course potentially boost this card further on your own. Okay, so we'll remove the plant now and try to look at some things that are not quite plants but are helpful to our situation. So what do we have here? I think we want to just stay on the common cards for now, just to help. And Spindle Harvesters is another one. Another low cost one. I don't know why this didn't come up before when I had the plant filter, or maybe I missed it. It's another one that anchors itself on entry. Absolutely, without a doubt, it's extremely low value, extremely low cost, but the reason you're playing cards like that is because it anchors itself and you don't have to pay anything to get that anchored. You can focus on boosting it and making it a nuisance for your opponent. This is the second half of the deck building we're going to do. We're going to be focusing on how to increase the value of these extremely low cards. But there's another one I want to add in before we do that, and it's the Muna Caregiver. The reason for this is she's able to apply Anchored again as a discard effect from reserve, which I will show off here. And there we go. So we can reapply Anchored off of her ability, so we're not playing her as much for these low stats. We want an additional way to anchor perhaps a Sneezer Shroom again and keep it even further on the board than it already will be. So we will put that up to 3 as well. Now, I think that's it for bodies on the board that we want to play. Yeah, so we're going to move over to the permanents that I want to use. So the first one I want to use is Bountiful Meadow. Bountiful Meadow is just discount in any game, no matter which game it is, discount on a playable card cannot be overstated. You are trying to play mana efficiency as much as you can to squeeze every bit of mana out of your turn for the best results possible. If you can reduce the cost of something like a Verdant Bag, the rare is currently 3. If you can bring that down to 2, or even 1 if you have 2 bountiful medals out, the sheer value you have of playing a 1 mana Verdant Bag onto the board to block your opponent has to pay way more than you to try and either get over it, stop it, remove it, put it to sleep, or anything that would disable its effect or put it off the field again. You're always going to win in that exchange if you can keep putting cheaper things down than your opponent needs to pay in order to remove it. Over time, this adds up. So Bountiful Meadow, definitely a 3 times, without question. And the second one I want to put down is the Spindle, which we will put up here. So the Spindle applies tough 2 to everything, and a reminder for tough 2 is that if something were to target your creature or character, whatever it costs, we increase that cost by 2. So even a 1 mana costed ability would then cost, or a 1 mana costed spell would cost 3 mana. And once again, as I just explained with Bountiful Meadow, you want to increase the cost of what your opponent is doing versus what you are putting out. If you have this in a Bountiful Meadow, that Verdant Bag now costs just 2, and your opponent has to pay 2 more to remove it, sleep it, get rid of it, target it in any way. At this point, you are playing such an efficient game with a Verdant Bag. What can your opponent do? What can they do? So this is definitely a 3 for me right now as well. So, those are my 2 landmarks of choice. And I do have a few spells that I want to use. The first one I want to use is Meditation Training. So, let me do that. Where is it? There it is. It's another cheap way to apply Anchored, especially you want to keep something that's constantly self-boosting itself, like the Dracaena, not the big one, the small one. At noon, boosts itself. If it's constantly being re-anchored, it's constantly getting bigger, it's constantly staying there, and it's just becoming more of a nuisance for your opponent to deal with. Remember that, it's going to be critical. So we want that one at 3 times as well. Remember, this is just a basic explanation of a thought process on how to build a deck and what you should look at in terms of trying to find a win con and strategize around one. Another magic spell I want to pick out for this is Nurture. And we are picking Nurture because as we've been explaining, we want to try and get our characters down cheap. We want to try and make them sticky, and we want to keep making them bigger. And Nurture is another really cheap way of doing this, particularly from reserve at just 1 mana. Choose target 2 characters, put them up by 1. Perfect. You get down your Dracaena, you get down your Sneezer Shroom, they boost themselves, you boost them again. What more can you want? That is another 3 of right there. So, and the last one is more of a defensive option. Beauty Sleep. There we are. This is a modal one for me because it reads 2 ways. First off, 1 mana to put something to sleep. Great. But the common is missing a really critical piece of text, and this will be the first one that I upgrade straight up to the rare in a moment, because it comes with a piece of text that says you may give target 2 boosts. And I will explain why in a moment. So that is another 3 times. And lastly, we're now at 39 cards. We need to pick the hero. And as you've noticed, the focus of this deck is to anchor, boost, be present, be efficient. And I feel that the best choice of hero for that, I may butcher the name, but it's going to be Taija and Naura. Or my Might come up. Come on. There we are. Tiger narrower. The reason for that is the first character you play each afternoon gains a boost, and we are looking to be efficient, power up our bodies as much as possible, make them present, make them big, make them a problem for our opponent. Absolutely my choice of hero for this matter. So there we are. We have our 40 cards. So now the next step. We have to think about which of these need to become our 15 rares. And the first one I'm going to pick out straight away, because I believe the upgrade is just so important, is we're going to go back to the Sneezer Shroom. We are going to take a look at the Sneezer Shroom and change it over. So here on the website you have the difference in the same color as the card text you would have for a rare anyway. So it is this orange for every change. And that change is at noon I gain 1 boost. So it anchors itself, starts at 111, and then in the next turn it's 222. If it was the first card you played with my hero, it starts at 222, goes up to 333. Which is, as I've stated before, you are looking at the moment for this deck, if you assume 1 mana should equal to 111 as a bare minimum cost, and you have now played a Sneezer Shroom at 2 and it becomes 333, you are playing more efficiently. And if you then start putting Bountiful Meadow into the equation, discount it. Bountiful Meadow, if you play 2, it will actually bring the cost of Sneezer Shroom down to 0 and you can play it for nothing. You can do that, that's not a problem, and then we're just being super efficient for that. So I'm going to change the Sneezer Shroom to 3 copies of the rare and remove the common. The second one I want to take a look at and point out is the Verdant Back. And why specifically the Verdant Back? So versus the common, you can see in orange the stats are a little lower, but the cost is more important here. It's only 3 from both hand and reserve. 445 is still extremely big for cost when you're looking at 3 for 333. You're playing a plant deck, which means you don't have to think about this too much from mid-game onwards. If you can advance in your expedition, you probably can. You can make it work with your anchored, and this Verdant Back then becomes a very high-costed, very low-costed high stats for what it does, and more often than not, you're going to advance with it. And as I keep stating, efficiency of cost is key here. So that is definitely our 3 times for that one as well, and we will remove the common in response. The Hydrakina, the boss card. I stated at the very beginning we would also change this over to the rare, and here is why. The critical piece of orange text, Tough X. We've already stated that tough makes everything more expensive, and Tough X is the number of plants you control in a plant deck. He counts himself, so you always start with Tough 1. Always. Start adding the spindle into the equation and continue with Eternal, and it constantly boosting itself. This card can very quickly become a nightmare scenario for your opponent. Definitely my choice here to go up to 3, because it is our key end play card, and we want to see that at some point. Not right at the beginning, but definitely towards the end. Okay, so I said earlier, Beauty Sleep. And we're going to take a look at Beauty Sleep now. I said the common was missing a really key piece of text, and here it is. Target character gains a sleep. You may give it 2 boosts, which is what gives it its modal status that I was referring to before. The reason for this is you can play this on your opponents and not give the boosts, but then put something to sleep in order for you to progress and advance in an expedition and take out one of their really high costs. Or if you definitely feel like you've lost one of your sides, one of your expeditions, and one of them has anchored, and you know you're not going to win this side anymore, but you've still got the mana to play Beauty Sleep, put it to sleep. Just put it to sleep, give it the boosts, and then it will be present on the next go, even stronger to help you on that side. As I said, modal, it has an aggressive and a defensive option. Play it to what suits your needs at the time. Definitely for me, another one that I would have at 3. And lastly, for the 15, we're going to take a look at the aloe vera again. And the reason for that is this deck relies on being able to boost constantly and being able to stay sticky, anchored, or otherwise. The aloe vera needs to be in the rare form in order to gain this ability to anchor itself. Not the best card to play down for this, because at that point you're looking at 4 for a 2/2/4. But when you've got a lot of other things down, it's a plant, it can anchor itself. What more do you need? We need to try and fill this deck with specifically plants that can anchor themselves. And again, at noon, resupply is not a bad ability. We like that. So we have to improve the common up to the rare to make this just enough playable that we would like it in here. So that's where we're going to have 3. There are some things that you could do different, and for example, bring the aloe vera back down to the common. Remove beauty sleep. And the aloe vera. We've also got to remove the hydroquina. For example, Bountiful Meadow. An important card. The rare allows you to also pay one additional mana to resupply. This isn't important to our deck. It's great to have, but we don't want that. We don't want to waste a rare slot on something that's not what I consider a critical ability. The spindle has the same problem. We are looking for its tough ability as our main point, but its rare is at noon. Target character you control gains 1 boost. Okay, so maybe I was a little wrong there. This is definitely something you could rarefy and bring aloe vera down, for example. Now, you know what? Actually, that to me is probably better than aloe vera in terms of what we want to do. It's a tough call. It's a tough call. You've got your hero that's already trying to do this, and you've got half of your bodies that are already trying to boost themselves. You could definitely run with aloe vera. You could definitely run with the spindle instead in its rare form. I'm probably going to test both because I haven't fully tested this out. And again, I'm not a professional. I don't claim to be. I am just trying to offer some relative advice for newcomers and people who need to work out the difference between deck building from before and after. And even I'm learning as we go here. So yes, the spindle is definitely an option. The Bountiful Meadow, for example, definitely you could. I wouldn't. It doesn't quite play to the game plan, but the spindle does. But you've only got 15 slots, and you've got to make sacrifices somewhere, and I'm not sure if the aloe vera is playable in its common form. I'm not sure. But that's the beauty of Altered. There are multiple ways to approach it, thanks to the rare system, and I like it this way. So the last thing I want to point out is 3 uniques. I would not try to focus on your uniques, but instead build your lists and then take a look at your uniques and go, which one of these contributes to my plan that this deck now works with? People who've watched my first video have seen that I have a hydroquina unique that definitely would go in here. I would swap one of my rares out for this unique, and then I would use that additional new rare slot because I've taken a rare slot out, and probably upgrade the spindle up to a rare from here, which is where I was getting a little confused, because I believe my normal list does have the spindle rarefied, but I've also applied my 3 uniques in, and I've not done that here. So keep in mind, add your 3 uniques in, maybe try to get those across your rare spread so that you could rarefy the spindle, and make this deck way stronger as a result. Okay, so that's all I want to cover for today, and we are just going to quickly cover the unique of the episode, which is a Shenlong, a I'm pulling that up on screen, and it is, for me, this was submitted to me because of its hand cost to stat ratio. Tough 1 is always good, I like that. 4 from the hand, 6, 5, 6. You can drop this on turn 2 and just pretty much win the expedition that you want to win. Unless your opponent also happens to have a unique Shenlong with those kind of stats. My only gripe is it's a Lyra card and not in Bravos. I'd love this to be in Bravos, I really would. It's just so much more I could do with it. The second ability, you can discard a card from your reserve. Target character gains a boost when you play it from reserve, is okay. Lyra doesn't use it that much or need it that much. But keep in mind that Lyra does like to play with boosts, and if X is boosted twice, gain this, and you could work with this card. I would play this generically if I wanted to make sure I had my 3 uniques in, and I was looking for something high statted with low cost, like my Verdant back in Muna. Definitely playable, and as always, it's fantastic artwork. Okay, guys, and that's going to be it for today. It was a bit of a longer one than I normally produce. As always, like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this more raw, rough talk on how to build a deck, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.